Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Yana, everybody in this courtroom is thinking about sexual orientation, sexual preference, whatever you want to call it. Who does what to whom and how they do it. They're looking at Andrew Beckett. They're thinking about it. They're looking at Mr. Wheeler, Ms. Kanine, even you, Yana. They're wondering about it. And trust me, I know they're looking at me and thinking about it. So let's get it out in the open. Let's get it out of the closet. Because this case is not just about AIDS, is it? So let's talk about what this case is really about. All about the general public's hatred or loathing or fear of homosexuals and how that climate of hatred and fear translated into the firing of this particular homosexual, my client, Andrew Beckett. Hello, friends. My name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back. This is the 156th episode of Backlook Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that guy over there. You recognize him? It's that TV guy. Yeah, tell that guy about our humble little show. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to have a very special guest on my program. She is an author. She's a tap dancer. She's a psychotherapist. She does so many things. She's doing too much. I'm envious of all of her talents. Maybe there's something intrinsic about her that has given her the ability to accomplish multiple tasks. So I am pleased and honored to have the privilege of introducing you to the author of Comfort Sequels, The Psychology of Movie Sequels from the 80s and 90s. Please welcome Emily Marinelli.
Oh, thank you so much, Phil, for the introduction. I feel so special and honored, and it's like so great to be on your show and to be able to talk about this movie with you. So thank you. And you completely nailed that monologue that Denzel does in the film. Like, you nailed it. I can tell, like, you practiced. You're a performer. You're an artist. That's just, like, hands down the truth.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Loyal listeners know that this is the second time we started the show. Because I had forgotten to press the record button. We're doing it right this time. We got it. We're moving right along.
Fabulous. Tech issues, it's just the way it goes. Yeah,
absolutely. So in the previous part, that the juicy part that you missed, Emily was telling us about the meaning of what it was like growing up, where she comes from, her background. So I want to continue the conversation. So what I want to do is I want to ask you, Emily, a series of questions, and we're going to kind of dig deep into what you're all about. So you've combined your practice of therapy and your love of the movies, and you wrote the Comfort Sequels, the Psychology of Movie Sequels from the 80s and 90s. So what's one of the most impactful things that you learned from writing this book?
Oh, what a great question. You know what? What I learned in writing this book is that I can write a book, which I wasn't sure, because it's my first book that I've written that wasn't like an academic textbook. And people hear the name of my book, Comfort Sequels, The Psychology of Movie Sequels from the 80s and 90s, and think, oh, is this going to be some kind of boring textbook? And it's not. It's not at all. It's stories from my childhood. It's a lot about these movie sequels that we love that are mostly kind of unloved or forgotten about movie sequels. I don't choose big Back to the Future 2 or Godfather 2 or any of those. I choose My Girl 2 and Grease 2, and Batman Returns is a little bit different, but like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the Secret of the Ooze, that's not, like such a widely watched movie, and neither is, Mannequin 2 On the Move. But these are stories from, movies that impacted me in a time in my life when there was a lot going on. I grew up poor working class in Oklahoma. I grew up as a queer kid. There was a lot of trauma around me, domestic violence, addiction, and things like that. And these movies were places I could go to that were familiar, where I recognized the characters. They could come back and tell me pretty much the same recycled story that happened in the first movie, or a little bit different, just different enough, right? Where it was like captivating, but kind of like the words that you opened up this podcast with, I would repeat words from the movies and say them around, and they were like teddy bears and lullabies to me. And I wanted to write a book that combined those stories with those movies that I love. And then also I've got some like celeb interviews and behind the scenes stuff, like you do kind of trivia type things on your show too, that are for people who love these movies like I do, I think will be really excited by and fascinated by. So I thought, well, what if I just put it all together, and can I do it? Can I write a book? And that was one of the most exciting things that I learned, is that I can. And it's kind of one of those like life reminders where, gosh, do you want to, that thing that you think you want to do, and oh, maybe I'll get to it someday, or maybe I'll do it before I die. It's on my bucket list. It's like, well, maybe that time is now, and maybe it's okay to just prioritize it in my life. And that's exactly what I did.
That's
And that's how
amazing. Yeah, one of the things I do is I draw pictures, and at least I've always considered myself fairly good at it. And one of the things that I have wanted to do is like draw a comic book, and but that was like, when you get older, the older you get, the more you put stuff like that on the back burner. And I'm so proud of you for being able to put that thing that you wanted to do, put your passion project ahead as a priority, so that you can get it done, and you learn that you can write a book. So that I find that fascinating, and it gives me encouragement that I could do the same thing.
Yes, you should. Yes, you can, and you should. Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
like I did. I just made it be a priority when I could have easily just kept putting it to the back burner, and it was time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's hard to put stuff on the back burner when there's a video game like God of War to be played. The game must be played. So, but I have to learn to put stuff like that on the back burner, so I can put forth something that's really important.
Mhm.
So another thing I wanted to ask is, have you used movies as part of the treatments that you engage in?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you for asking me. Yes, I love bringing in pop culture when I'm working with clients as a therapist, but also as a teacher, as a professor. I teach graduate level psychology students, and I love bringing in film examples. And I love, when a client says, I say, well, what was your self care over the weekend? And they'll say, well, I watched this TV show and I did that. I'm always going to pause, and I'm always going to say, well, what TV show was it? And then ask them further, what does it mean for you in your life? What characters do you resonate with? And there's always these like incredible connections and things that can unfold from those conversations. Whereas I think some therapists, and this is throwing no shade at any therapist, but some therapists might just be like, okay, and what else? And not go into the inquiry about, go deeper, right? And go into the inquiry about the thing itself, the book you're reading, the music you're listening to. And I always am interested in that, because there's so much rich material and relatable things that can come from that. And I think to go past it for me and how I practice is a huge miss. And also, growing up, these movie sequels, and I'll just show my book, this comfort sequels of all these movie sequels that were comforting to me, which is why it's called that. They helped me make meaning in my life. Like I could, relate to the world through the mood rings I would wear watching Beta in My Girl 2, and in My Girl, of course, but in My Girl 2, which is actually uh, a much lighter movie than My Girl. My Girl's pretty traumatizing. My Girl
Yeah. I haven't
actually,
seen it, but I've heard.
gosh, it's like, I don't know, it's borderline not a kid's movie.
Right, right.
My Girl 2 is much lighter and fun, and it's coming of age, and it's fierce, and she's a fierce character, a fierce female character that was great for me to be able to look up to, and predictable. And so those kinds of role models, archetypes through these movies that are on the surface silly, Never-Ending Story 2 is ridiculous. But at the same time, it was helping me think about my father and putting him and my relationship with him in a certain context. And helping me radically accept that my father is never going to come back like Bastian's father did in Neverending Story 2 and things like that, where I think for clients and for me, I'm always interested in exploring what these what these movies, what these books, what these TV shows mean for them and how they relate to them in their lives and how they help make sense of their lives through the pop culture that we consume. I'm curious for you though, if you would be willing to share, like, when you were little, what were some of the like go-to things that you would like watch over and over again that brought you comfort? Like, what did you love?
Oh, there's so many things. I was a TV kid. I was practically raised on TV. I was a latchkey kid. So,
Mhm.
some of my favorite shows that I really enjoyed were like the Transformers. That's top of mind. And then there was like
Yeah.
a whole slate of shows like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, the
Totally.
Thundercats, the Silverhawks, and all of those kid adventure
Yeah.
shows that were desperate to sell toys. I was like, I ate it all up. And then and
Yeah.
then there were other shows like the adventure shows that used to come on in the afternoon, like the A Team or Knight Rider, or the
Mhm.
comedies like the Cosby Show, or
Mhm.
what was it? A Different World. There was like a whole Thursday night lineup, like Cheers. I would like watch all of that. I was consuming it all, and that
Yeah.
was definitely a comfort for me to watch those things. And when I was younger, I didn't really get to go out to a lot of movies, so it was really the TV shows that I found most of the comfort. And the movies that I watched, I tended to watch like the Saturday matinee that came on the UVH channel. So it's some kind of kung fu theater or Godzilla movie or something like that. And not the whole movie. Like I don't know which movies that I watch because I'm not really paying attention to the movies until they start fighting. And then it has my full attention. And then they start getting along with the plot and whatnot. And then I kind of fade away. So I don't even know which, like, I know the Godzilla movies that I watch because the Godzilla movies are named after the monsters that he fights.
That's
So I know, I
mhm.
know those, but
Yeah,
most of the,
Mothra.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but most of the Kung Fu movies that I have no idea because I never watched them start to finish.
You were there for those big energy moments of
Yeah,
fighting, and
yeah,
otherwise
yeah.
it's not relevant to you. I love that.
Right, right.
Other ones like He-Man, and I watched She-Ra and like all these Thundercats. Did you like soak up the toys too and like get some of those things to take home with you, parts from the shows?
Well, being poor, we didn't have a lot of the toys, but we did have like a couple of Transformers, a couple of the He-Man action figures, and never the main ones. Always like the third or fourth character, never the never the main characters. I mean, we
Characters,
did
yeah.
have like three of the Dinobots. I guess they count as main characters, but like
Mhm.
I never had He-Man himself or Man at Arms himself when I was growing up. And now that I'm an adult and they're reissuing those toys, now I'm getting them.
Yeah. So you get it, like, you get wanting to come back to that nostalgia, right?
Right.
And to that spirit and have it tangible to, like, hang out with as an adult. Like, I love and sometimes you could get toys later on at the flea market. That's where I got a lot of mine too, like,
Right.
through these bargains in the flea market. Like, growing up working class, similarly, I couldn't always get the thing right at the time, but I could later, and that matters to me from a psychological standpoint because I think that a lot of times like collectors now will I think have this idea of like wanting to take a part of the movie with them to be able to hold on to it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
kids have that. Kids want that with whatever the thing is. Of course, it's a totally different world now with phones and technologies and all of that, but to have something tangible to hold on to look at that immerses you into the film, that's another part of the psychology of what is comforting about why we love the things we love and why we want them with us all the time,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
And there's a huge market for movie replicas and
Yeah.
toys. Like
Yeah.
before, you would not have a whole bunch of toys of a particular property. Like if there was an X-Men cartoon, then maybe there's an X-Men action figure and that's about it. Maybe there's a Halloween costume, but now they'll sell like Wolverine masks like all year long at a toy store,
Mm,
or at like, well, not a toy store because they don't exist anymore, but like at a Target or Walmart or Amazon. I just seen a Wolverine's claw toy that they were selling. There's also lightsabers and like all different versions of spaceships. Like they'll have like a die-cast spaceship, and then they'll have a Lego spaceship. They're incredible varieties of toys from all sorts of different properties. And then there are the more lifelike replicas that are sold by like prestigious collection houses. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, it's all different levels, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
because different markets of who is going to consume these things.
yeah,
And yeah, it's capitalism and it's whatever. We
yeah,
can what we want to say about that, but the heart of the nostalgia of like wanting to take home with you part of the film, immerse yourself in some kind of way, right? Me dressing up as Catwoman to like be a part of Batman Returns
yeah,
and
yeah.
doing a trampoline dance to her, which is totally not related to Batman Returns, important to me when I was a kid. These things where we want to be immersed and part of the film and return to what is comforting and familiar again and again as much as possible. And that's what comfort sequels is really about.
Right, right. And also, what you call it? You had mentioned, well, you're asking about my was Twin Peaks.
Oh my goodness. How would you know that?
Well, apparently you had a podcast, or maybe you still have a podcast. It's called the Twin Peaks Tattoo Podcast. So is that continuing, and are you continuing to use Twin Peaks as your comfort show?
Oh, thank you so much. I love your questions. They're so thoughtful and like, yeah, brilliant. Yes, I have a podcast called the Twin Peaks Tattoo Podcast where I interview people about their Twin Peaks tattoos, which sounds kind of funny. I'm not a tattoo artist. I don't know, but I have a lot of Twin Peaks tattoos. I have a lot of tattoos in general. I'm pretty covered. And I thought to myself, there's got to be people out there like me who love the show and have ink. And it turns out there's a ton. And so I reached out and I was able to interview. Have you seen Twin Peaks?
No,
So
it was never my jam. I never got
Mhm.
into it. I know it's a show that I would probably like if I ever got into it, but there are so many shows right now. It's kind of hard to get into new shows.
I know it's horrific, but it's a show for listeners who may not know. It's a show from 1991, and um, it's David Lynch and Mark Frost, and there's a lot of it really sort of changed the world of television when it came out and really defied form and structure in a lot of really amazing, incredible ways. And it has developed a cult following, and I'm part of that happily, and it's and part of fandom and totally own that. And I just wanted to have a place to talk to people about their Twin Peaks tattoos and what their ink means to them. Almost like you asked me that question about, do I bring it in with my clients, pop culture with my clients, or movies or TV? And it's the same kind of way of talking about your tattoo opens up a lot. People share a lot about themselves, how they found the show, what it means to them, why they chose the symbology of the tattoo that they chose. All of that stuff is very interesting and exciting for me. And I asked you if you had seen it because a lot of the show takes place in a diner, or the diner is an important part of sort of a heart place in the show. And it is an actual diner that exists in Washington State. And I was able to talk to the current owner of the diner. I was able to interview her on the show because she has Twin Peaks tattoos, and just all kinds of people who, Lane Freefall, who is a tattoo artist out of the UK. She was in a Star Wars movie, and she's a tattoo artist, and she has a Twin Peaks tattoo and does Twin Peaks tattoos on other people. And like, what is that world for her like? So it's a really, really wonderful conversations. And even if your listeners are not into Twin Peaks, you can substitute that level of fandom, like excitement for whatever your thing is. What is your comfort? What is your, when you're a deep diver into something, what do you deep dive into? What do you know about and love so much? And Twin Peaks is certainly one of them for me. And um, from a sequel standpoint, since that's what my book is about, there was a third season that David Lynch made 25 years later after the original series. And it's not a remake, it's a continuation. So it's like a true sequel form. And it's called Twin Peaks: The Return. And a lot of people are not into it, but I'm super into it and I love it. There's also a movie that came out in 1992, which is a prequel film, which I also love. I love prequels because it's a part of the continued story, even if it's prior. So it's a prior sort of, version or iteration.
Right, right. So, I want
Thanks
to
for
ask
asking.
you about because your book is about sequels, but I sent you the grand list of sequels. I mean, I'm sorry, it's called the grand list of movies, and it has some sequels on it. And of the movies that was on the grand list of movies, you chose Philadelphia. So why did you choose that movie?
That's a great question. Yeah, why didn't I choose a sequel? It
I
seems like
mean,
a lot.
I'm good with whatever you chose, but it does beg the question, as they say.
Well, the few sequels that were listed, and there weren't a ton listed on the list,
Right,
but the few ones that were are wonderful. Like you had Lethal Weapon 2 on there, I believe, and Back to the Future 2, and those are like actually really good movies. Um, but they weren't my comfort sequels when I was a kid. I watched them later on. You know, they weren't sort of ones that were on again and again. Like Grease 2, I mean, Grease 2 was on my TV, on my VHS every single day. Rewind, play, rewind, but like repeat. And those weren't, which is why I thought, well, it makes sense for me to and excited for me and honored to be able to speak with you about a movie that did have a lot of significance and meaning for me growing up. And Philadelphia was that movie. It wasn't any of those sequels that were on that list particularly. Um, and Philadelphia, I just remember when it came out, it was it was very reflective of what was going on at the time, especially in Oklahoma around HIV and AIDS prevention and education, which I was doing. So I was an AIDS activist from the time when I was like in middle school. I started a nonprofit AIDS youth organization in Oklahoma. There just wasn't resources. There weren't things like there were in California in 1993. There wasn't access to information. In Oklahoma, it was like you got to subtract 10 years, in terms of progress. Like
right,
just take away a decade and we were that far behind. Like I was doing HIV education in schools and it was abstinence only education, so you couldn't even show to like how to put on a condom, and like
right,
you couldn't have a condom in the classroom, and it's like this is safer this is
right,
sexuality
right,
education. You can't even talk about condoms, like what's happening here?
right, right,
And then no wonder there's just like a lot of unwanted pregnancies where
right,
people
right.
like, what are you doing?
It's a lot of unwanted pregnancies and a lot of AIDS infections, and it's like I don't understand why our abstinence-only education isn't working.
Why this is happening, and so there was just this great need and for more educations, which is why we started the Youth AIDS Education Project, and we wrote original plays, and performed them around town. At different, we did youth shelters. We did a whole we tried to reach populations that were really really in need. And as a queer kid, you know, HIV and AIDS was like deeply hurting my community. I came out when I was 13, so I was young, on the younger side. And my friends who were teenagers were getting sick and they didn't have access to care in Oklahoma. And so it was also like personally affecting me in my community, not just in a larger queer community sense, but like I knew people who were getting sick. I knew a couple of people who died who were like 16, 17 years old. That I, I Some people grow up in communities where a lot of their friends and teenagers die because of different reasons, violence, whatever, in their communities. And that wasn't I didn't have a lot of friends my age who were dying, who weren't like already sick of something, right? Like had terminal disease from when they were young. And so it was really significant to have an experience of someone I knew getting sick and not being able to get treatment that they needed, and then dying so young. And all of that could have been prevented, which speaks to inequities in healthcare that are still true today, and still disparities about health in every part of the world, but particularly like the US is a superpower. So many people here have access and still so many people don't. And
Yeah,
so, you know, long story short, just to say that it meant a lot to me, this movie, when it came out. And I remember sitting in math class in middle school, just so bored. Sorry to math lovers everywhere, but I was not a math lover and I was never good at math. And I was just so much more interested. I was the kid who was really good in school and like loved like reading and writing and social studies, and then but like would leave towards the end of the day so I could go do work at the Red Cross. I just cared more about activism and doing HIV education and prevention than I did about school. But I was sitting in math class reading. There was a chapter book about Philadelphia that came out, and so I was just reading that in class. It was so bold. Like I'm sure the teacher saw me and was like, "Okay, what is she doing? Reading Philadelphia to teach math?" And so actually when I graduated high school, the things they have, the senior superlatives where it's like most likely to
Yeah.
what do this or do that. And I got voted, this was a category they made up for me. I got most likely to find a cure for AIDS. I'm not even kidding. That's what I was doing instead of like caring about, history and math. I do love history, but it's like I didn't. There was what was happening around HIV and AIDS was so much more alive and urgent for me than who was the governor of Oklahoma in 1972. I really don't care.
Right.
I still don't. Okay, I'm sorry. I really don't care. They're all Republican white cis het men who many of whom are just complete asses. Okay,
Right.
I
Right.
don't care. I do care about something that's deeply important and special to me, and that where I can see there's so much work that needs to be done. So activism mattered more, and Philadelphia reflected a lot of what was needed at the time, which was mainstream acceptance around the topic and destigmatizing, which wasn't happening at that mainstream level. This is the first mainstream Hollywood movie to tackle this issue with people who were big stars.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, some people criticize it as like being, oh, well, it doesn't really reflect our true experience. AIDS activists and people and ACT UP and things and going like, this isn't true. This isn't, y'all are just a bunch, this is like straight Hollywood trying to make a queer movie about AIDS, and y'all are not doing this well. And I hear that, and that's important and valid critique. But at the same time, it actually did reflect a lot of values and a lot of places where I knew people who, like Denzel, weren't like jerks, but had homophobic thoughts and didn't understand the disease still, and needed to be reached at that level of, what they called like universal appeal, to be able to reach those audiences. And so Philadelphia, I think, actually succeeded in that in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely pushed the envelope forward. And another thing that it did is that it kind of made it safe to have more shows and movies that put homosexuality or different lifestyles in a positive light. So it kind of gave rise to like a TV show like Will and Grace, or or other shows and movies that was not afraid to. It made it safe because it was so successful. It was it made a lot of money. It was very well critically received. The audiences liked it, and then I think it kind of opened people's eyes to
Yeah.
the situation, and it changed attitudes and it changed hearts and minds. It succeeded on that front. So I don't know if the criticisms of the movie is well founded, because it kind of succeeded in pushing the envelope forward, as I said, and getting people to understand that some of their attitudes might not be correct.
I agree. When I was thinking about the 90s and HIV movies and queer movies, I was like, "Oh, well, what about like Jeffrey? And what about It's My Party?" And then I looked and I was like, "Let me just look these movies up because I love those movies." And they all came after Philadelphia. So those bigger Hollywood movies that were doing this stuff, Philadelphia really opened that for that to happen. Like you were saying, it wasn't till after that movie that these other ones could come forward. And before Philadelphia, there's movies like Longtime Companion, which is a great one, and Parting Glances with Steve Buscemi, which I love. But those are smaller, more independent movies. If you're not queer, you probably didn't see them when they came out. Or,
Right.
it's not touching, it's not as far reaching
Right.
as Philadelphia was. And it really was. And to your point, Peel, and helped change people's hearts and minds And, with Bruce Springsteen on board
Oh
also,
yeah,
right? Like,
absolutely.
it's like, men especially
Right.
who are like masculine men who listen to Bruce Springsteen and Neil Young, we're
Yeah.
gonna reach them. And they
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. I feel like Philadelphia walked so that Brokeback Mountain Brokeback Mountain could run.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Right.
And that's, very similarly, you've got these two very famous Hollywood straight cis het guys who are playing these roles in Brokeback, and they're like going to the next level of
Yeah.
like pushing still in a wider audience universal appeal type of way, but they're breaking through a lot of um just again also stereotypes about queer men in Hollywood that would show up in movies again and again. A lot of
Right.
times being the villain or the, just kind of uh pejorative portrayals of queerness.
Right. So I want to get you to tell my friends out there listening about how to reach you, your social media, your websites, any publications that you got besides your book. So plug yourself, Emily. Tell the people about you,
Oh,
how to
okay.
reach you.
Well, you can certainly pick up a copy of Comfort Sequels, The Psychology of Movie Sequels from the 80s or 90s. And you really want to, because look, here's Falcor, here's Slimer, you've got Gizmo on the cover. I mean, it's like so great. It covers 11 comfort sequels from my childhood and great celeb interviews. I got an interview with Steve Whitmire, who created Rizzo the Rat in the Muppets, and Christine Ebersol, 3 of the T-Birds from Grease 2. This is not to be missed, comfort sequels. You can order a copy at tuckerdspress.com. And also you can, get it at wherever you buy books, bookstores. Hopefully you're supporting local bookstores. But you can also get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and things like that. And I can be reached on Instagram at Ems Marinelli and also emsmarinelli.com. So you can find me there, reach out to me. We can chat sequels, whatever you like. I have I've written some articles on Film Obsessive and TV Obsessive websites, and also in the Blue Rose magazine. I'm also, as you had mentioned, doing the Twin Peaks Tattoo podcast. Get a tattoo, let's talk. And I am working on a book about trauma and Twin Peaks that I'm co-authoring that should be coming out in a few years. I'm still working. It's still being developed, and we're working and writing hard. And I'm also writing an oral history of a movie from 1996 called Trees Lounge with Steve Buscemi. Have you ever seen it? So do you know this movie?
No, I know the actor, but I don't know that movie.
Oh, it's beautiful. He wrote and directed and starred in it.
Oh,
It's a
wow.
little film that, people didn't see much when it came out, but then it became sort of had a cult following later on. But it's a great movie, and I'm trying to interview production people and just whoever was involved who would be willing to talk to me about it. It's one of my favorite movies. So
Awesome.
that's what I'm working on. Thank you for letting me plug it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So let's move right along. We are going to talk about Philadelphia in our opening credits. So, Emily, why don't you tell the people about Philadelphia?
Of course. Andrew Beckett is a star attorney at one of the largest and most prestigious law firms in Philadelphia. He finds himself on the rise at the firm and elevated, and is entrusted with some of the firm's most critical and important work. Suddenly, he's fired. The firm claims that it was for incompetence, but he believes that it is that they discovered his private life. He never disclosed to his employers that he was gay and that he had AIDS, and he believes that they found out and fired him for it. He seeks to sue his former bosses, and his only hope lies in an ambulance chaser who also harbors fears and distrust about his lifestyle.
Excellent. This movie was released January 14th, 1994, produced by TriStar Pictures and Clinica I should have rehearsed that. Clinica Estatico. I think I got it. It grossed over $77 million in the US and Canada, and over $206 million worldwide on a reported budget of $26 million. So this movie had worldwide appeal. I don't know if there was some heavy edits in any of the other countries. I know there were some countries where they probably didn't show this movie at all. And in spite of all of that, it did deal extremely well on the worldwide market. Now, what I like to do is I like to check for inflation. So if we go back to the 77 million, if this movie was made today, then the 77 million gross would translate into $163 million. The 206 million gross would translate to $437 million. And the budget would have been at $55 million. So yeah, this movie was incredibly successful. What I want to note is that it was successful in the US. Like, it didn't made its money in the US and been successful, but it was exported and made even more money. So that is fascinating. So this had a worldwide impact. So let's talk about who was starring in the movie. You want to start us off?
So of course, first is Tom Hanks playing the lead role of Andrew Beckett, who was in Castaway and Big. I love Big so much. Big is so great. Forrest Gump, Asteroid City, which is such a beautiful, beautiful Wes Anderson movie, and Elvis. And I really love his portrayal. I think it's some of his best acting. And of course, he did win the Oscar for it. But I also love Tom Hanks from Bosom Buddies. I love Tom Hanks from,
I'm not the only one who remembers.
Yeah, I loved Bosom Buddies. I look forward to it, and I think I even watched it on reruns and syndication. I also had some of it. I would like tape it on VHS when it was on, so that I could watch the episodes of it later. Like, I loved just the absurd of it, some like it hottish version of
right,
and trying to just make it but it's hysterical, and I loved him ever since then. And I love his movies. I love The Money Pit. I love just like funny 80s movies that he did, and also some of his more dramatic roles like Captain Phillips, which was one of the, I think, most incredible portrayals of sort of shock trauma and PTSD that I've seen on film. And he's iconic. Tom Hanks is iconic.
Yes, he is. His acting is magnificent. It's like it seems to get better and better. It's like it's hard to believe that he started off as a comedian and then to become this incredible dramatic actor. But I suppose all comedians have that in them. But I guess him in particular. So people like him and Michael Keaton and Robin Williams, just incredible dramatic actors. Like, you didn't know until you saw it. And then you have a movie like Castaway, where it's like he's by himself for most of the movie. So he literally carries that movie, and
he holds it.
Yeah. And he does some incredible things just to prepare for and work in that movie. And Forrest Gump, it's like he's completely in the character of Forrest Gump. It's awesome.
It really is. Yeah, he's fully in it. I mean, and that's, of course, one of the classics. Forrest Gump is one of the classics.
Right. So also there's Denzel Washington. He plays Joe Miller. He's also been in Fences, Antoine Fisher, Training Day, which I had covered in episode 131. Training Day also was one of my favorite movies. He won an Academy Award for that one. And he's definitely one of my favorite actors. He's sometimes I just go to a movie just because he's in it. Like, that's what I did for Equalizer 3. Just because, and it's like I enjoyed like the first Equalizer. The second Equalizer, it wasn't all that into. The third one, I know that a lot of people didn't like it, but I kind of enjoyed it for the same reasons that they did it. Yeah, so he's always been good.
Yeah, he's fantastic and also, incredible. He's really funny in Philadelphia, but,
Yeah,
incredible dramatic actor in action movies, but also, like in Fences, for example, that you had mentioned, he's just what he's doing, it just is kind of otherworldly, and he is, such a accomplished stage actor as well. I mean, his
yeah,
career is the 3 of them, even the next one person I'm gonna mention, and then forward, these are top billing movie stars, like, these are, like, really,
yeah.
individuals, and Tom's chemistry in the movie is just right. It's just exactly
Yeah,
what it
it's
needs.
just right. And I'm glad you noticed that, because it's like you have you have a guy that has kind of a prejudice and animosity towards the other guy, and and you can see him struggling with that, right? Even like when they're first meeting in what's his name, Joe Miller's office, when they were first meeting, and it's like Joe Miller's kind of backing away.
He's like, "What happened to your face?" And he's like, "Oh, I have AIDS," and he just kinda, like, backs
Yeah, yeah,
away.
yeah. It's like it was a reflexive movement, and then as the movie progresses, as it goes along, and you can see his views softening more and more. So yeah, it's and the relationship getting better, and him having like a closer relationship with not just Tom Hanks' character Andrew Beckett, but the Beckett family. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's fantastic.
Yeah, really well casted, and I know originally they didn't want, or they weren't thinking about Denzel for that part. It was a totally sort of different
Yeah, yeah,
rewritten
yeah.
part.
It usually goes that way. They were going to give it to a comedic actor. It was going to be a white comedic actor, and they was looking at some of those people, and then and then what happened? Well, I'll mention it in the trivia, but something
Oh,
changed the director's mind, and that's how Denzel got to part.
mhm. Thank goodness he did.
Yeah,
Um, and then Jason Robards, who plays Charles Wheeler, the kind of head of, Wyatt Wheeler, Helen Teller, and Brown, was in All the President's Men. His career is, like, epic. All the President's Men, Magnolia, Parenthood. Parenthood is so good. I'm glad that you mentioned that one. But, another sort of Hollywood standard, huge actor, and who is playing an evil dude pretty much in this movie, right? Like, he's hard to be likable, but there's something about Jason's performance that, somebody has got it when they're playing an evil dude and you still kind of are interested in them and like them enough, or like appreciate enough what they're doing.
yeah,
And that's what Jason does. You don't just like hate them completely. There's something that's human about him, even though he's, obviously in the wrong, in my opinion.
yeah, yeah. And there are even points where, or moments where you see him almost coming to an understanding of Andrew's point of view, but still maintaining his hard line, because he has to prove himself right. He has to prove that he was right in doing what he wanted to do. But yeah, also a guy that's always playing that CEO slash general type. At least lately, I know early in his career it was more. He had a more variety of roles, but later in his career, he has that CEO face. So up next is Antonio Banderas. He plays Miguel Alvarez, and he's also been in The Mask of Zorro, The Skin I Live In, and Desperado, which I covered in episode 45. Desperado is probably my favorite movie that he's in. But he's always good. He's good in the Spy Kids movies. He's good in The Mask of Zorro, which is another favorite that he's in. I like him in his action adventure roles, but he can pretty much do anything.
He can do anything. I didn't know that you covered Desperado. I'm gonna go back and listen to that. That's great. I also love Desperado. It's such a good movie, and he's such a badass in it. I mean, he's just so good. And it's very sexy, and it's also, yeah, it's
Yeah,
got good fighting scenes. It makes me think about what you said earlier about loving the fighting scenes, but the plot is also good in this one.
yeah.
And Antonio, I think I may have first seen Antonio in Philadelphia, and then he came from him, and we're like, hey, come into this movie, which he did, and so it kind of made a crossover into more bigger mainstream films at that point, but he was in the Mambo Kings, which is really good, that I loved. And then of course Evita, which I love Evita so much. I know
Yeah.
it's so fun. It's one of the greatest. It's Madonna, it's Antonio. It's like almost 3 hours of pure music, and his singing is so good and their chemistry is so good, and I just love Evita. So anyway, yes to Antonio. And he's great as Miguel, Andrew's lover, his partner. He you can see the tenderness between the two of them. That chemistry is also beautiful and really natural. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like, ooh, we're two straight guys,
Yeah,
trying to figure out how. No, I believe that they love each other and live together and are partners for many years. It's very natural with them and organic, and he does an amazing job. His acting's always been great. I mean, Antonio's amazing.
yeah, absolutely. I actually, before you go on to the next one, I
Yeah.
just wanted to mention that I think Philadelphia was the first time I also saw Antonio Banderas, but I did not know it was like who he would become, like the actor he would grow to be.
Did you see it at Philadelphia in the theater, or did you rent it later on VHS? Like, when did it come into your life?
I want to say I did see it in the theater. This is something that I would definitely have gone to the theater to see. But it was so long ago that things kind of get mushy, but I'm 90% certain that I saw this in the theater.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, me too, and then, of course, like, on VHS every day again and again.
Right.
Um, Mary Steenburgen is the next one who plays Belinda Conine. Am I saying her last name right,
I'm
in
not
her character?
exactly sure. It sounds good to me the way you're saying it.
Okay, good. We'll go with it. And she plays opposing counsel, and other movies she was in, Las Vegas, Step Brothers. Oh my gosh, she's so funny in Step Brothers. Back to the Future Part 3. I can't even remember that she was in that. That's so good. That's great.
I think she
Um,
plays Doc Brown's love interest.
oh, okay. See, now I got to go back and watch that.
Yeah, she was in, because I had to think about it too. And when I thought about it, I was thinking, well, she must have been Doc Brown's love, because he goes back in time. He wants to live in the Old West, and he hooks up with her. And
That's right.
yeah,
Yes, right, right.
and I think he stays in the Old West. I can't remember, but yeah,
That's
I feel like now I need to go back and watch it.
Part 3. I'm into it. Well, she's just, she's a powerhouse in this film, and again, it's hard to like her because there's an evilness to a lot of the things she's saying about, coming after, Andrew Beckett for his lifestyle, and, you made some risky choices, and it's like, he was just having sex the way pretty much most of us have sex, and, it's not his fault that this thing happened, but she's doing what she needs to do to try to win the case. And even within that, and how despicable some of the things that come out of her mouth are, she's just really, really good and really solid as a performer, and that comes across, and there's something that's human and likable about her. And you have a very cool trivia fact later on about that, one of her scenes that I
Yeah,
read, and
yeah,
oh my god, blown away by this. Anyway, a little, like, preview of what's to come.
absolutely. Up next is Charles Napier. He plays Judge Garnett. He's also been in The Manchurian Candidate from 2004, Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery, and Silence of the Lambs. I covered that one in episode 54. And he's the type, just like Jason Robards before him, plays a general / CEO type. Well, he's like a general, a judge, a prosecutor, a governor, a mayor, something like that. That's the role he fits in. And in this case, he's the judge.
Yeah, and, like, I think him and, like you said, Jason Robards, they do have archetypes that they play, and they're also serving up a lot of old Hollywood realness. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing. They're just have these very long careers. They play these very certain, there's also, like, yeah, courtroom energy. They do courtroom dramas really well, and he's one of them, but he's also really great at, playing a judge who's trying to make space for something that is still an uncomfortable thing to have going on in the courtroom. This case that is about queerness, that is about stigma, it is about homophobia, it is about discrimination, to be able to hold both sides of that, and maybe even also deal with his own discomfort or his own internal journey about what it means to be holding space for this kind of case to be, decided.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
a moment where he says, well, something about there's no race, or there's no something, there's no sexual orientation in my courtroom, or something like that. There's no
Yeah, yeah.
identity in the
Right.
courtroom. And then Bill's just like, okay, but with all due respect, Your Honor, like, we don't live in this courtroom.
Right,
You know,
right, right.
I
Yeah.
just love that moment because it's like, oh, right. And we don't live in this courtroom. And also to say that there's not, homophobia going on as part of this case is also in the courtroom. It
Yeah.
doesn't actually represent the truth of the matter, which is it's always going on. It's
Yeah.
always at thoughts. Again, back to your opening monologue of this podcast, it's always there. That's what this case is really about. And it's going to be true no matter what courtroom it's in and no matter where we are in the world. Homophobia still exists today, even though HIV and AIDS is at a totally different place than it was then. Homophobia is still alive and well. Discrimination based on HIV is still alive and well. All of these things, there might be, protections in place. There might be legislation that has happened. There might be social justice and social changes that have been made, but all of these things are still true. It just looks a little bit different now. Anyway, sorry, I just went on a monologue.
Well, no worries. You're in a safe space. At least you're in a safe space with me. So if you feel that you need to get it out, just get it out. It's all right. I'm your therapist today. You and the people listening to the show. Anyways, if you could talk about the next one.
Oh, yes. The last one we're mentioning is Tracy Walter, who plays the librarian in one of the in a very important scene, who was in Batman, who looks like you covered in episode 23, the original Batman, 89's Batman, and then Aaron Brockovich and Conan the Destroyer. That's amazing.
Yeah.
What a wide range of movies.
Yeah, so Tracy Walter, he is known to fans everywhere as Bob the Goon, and I just wanted to include him in here, even though like there are a lot more cast members and a lot of people who have more prominent roles. I wanted to include him because whenever I see Tracy Walters, it's a treat, and so you get to see him playing a very reserved, very learned librarian, trying to get this sickly gay person out of his library.
Such a poignant scene.
Yeah. A very important scene. I can't wait to talk about it. But yeah, Bob the Goon it's always nice to see him. So why don't you tell us about the director?
Yeah, Jonathan Demme, you might know from, and you've covered Silence of the Lambs. I'm Carolyn Parker. He directed Rachel Getting Married, The Manchurian Candidate from 2004, The Argonomist, and The Truth About. Aside from Silence of the Lambs, I actually haven't seen any of these movies, which it seems really strange to me because I think Jonathan Demme, and he's, had such a significant career and has done such incredible work, and I've seen a few of his other ones, I realized, but none of these. How about you?
I'm the same way. The only other movie I've seen was The Manchurian Candidate besides Silence of the Lambs. And that one wasn't, it was a remake of an original, and I never saw the original, and I didn't particularly like the remake. And I don't even know, it had Denzel Washington in it, and it had something to do with brainwashing, and maybe there was something about it that I wasn't getting, but it wasn't resonating with me. So that was the only other. And like you said, I haven't seen a lot of his movies. So when I see the name Jonathan Demme, nothing really particular pops out at me. It's not like if I should see that name, I have to rush out to see the movie. I won't remember his name after this show.
Do you do that though? Like, do you follow a specific director where you're like, oh, I really like that, I'm gonna go watch a lot of his movies or her movies or their movies or whatever?
Sort of, kind of. So Jordan Peele is one. Is like, especially after it, and I follow him because it's like I've been a fan of him for a long time anyway. So ever since he started, when I first seen him on Mad TV, and then he moved on to Key and Peele, and I'm thinking that he's just going to follow that path of being a comedic actor. Maybe he would be in some comedy movies, which he's done a couple, or maybe he would be in a talk show, like a late night talk show, or do something like that. But instead, he became a director of suspense horror movies, and that was shocked, and I'm shocking. And I know there's a relationship between horror and comedy, but I am surprised that that was the route he went, and that he's such a huge fan of horror movies. He's only had 3 movies, so I've seen all 3 of those, and he's in talks to do more movies. So that's definitely a director that I tend to follow. And then there are some classic directors like Steven Spielberg, or even though he hasn't really directed anything lately that really popped out, or Christopher Nolan. I don't really follow Christopher Nolan, but I am aware of him. Like, I know the things he's doing. So whenever
Mhm.
he directs a movie, it kind of piques my interest. But there are, and it's only since Ben he directed the Batman movies. But I also like Interstellar, and I also like Inception. So I'm kind of in that
Yeah.
camp, right? And I
Mhm.
like that
Yeah.
he's kind of a sci-fi dude. So we're going to see a lot of that type of stuff coming from him, and he's got this off the wall kind of advanced vision of what's possible with science fiction. So of course Quentin Tarantino. I haven't seen everything. I think maybe I've seen like every other Tarantino film. I haven't seen all of his movies, but yeah, but I get it. Like with Tarantino, it was like, yeah, I'll probably watch things like that. I can't really think of a whole bunch of directors, but those kind of come to mind as
Mhm.
you ask me that question.
Mm. Yeah,
So
those are great. Yeah, Jordan Peele's amazing.
yeah, absolutely. So this movie was written by Ron Naceweiner or Naceweiner. I'm not exactly sure if I'm saying that right, but but it is an unusual spelling. He's also written Smithereens, Mrs. Sofo, The Prince of Pennsylvania, Love Hurts, and Painted Veils. And I have not seen any of these movies. They seem to be indie darlings. I'm sure that
Mm.
they have a huge fan base.
Same. I wish I had seen any of those because I love his writing in Philadelphia, and I think, you know, he's they're probably really well written.
Yeah.
Uh, and Love Hurts actually sounds really familiar, but I can't recall it. So, indie darlings written by queer men are one of my genres. So I now will check some of those out. Thank you for helping me think about that. Because yeah, his writing in Philadelphia is great. And speaking to some of the authenticity of the film, hiring a queer screenwriter is absolutely appropriate for this movie, especially because there aren't a lot of other kind of queer representation outwardly in the film and production, aside from some of the folks that they brought in who actually had HIV, who were in the community, who were activists, who were just men who were dealing with this disease in 1993 as cast members, which I know we're going to talk a little bit later about one of them, but in the trivia, but just to say, like, even some of the background folks were also the guys who look so sick. A lot of them are queer men who were actually sick, who they brought in, who they met in the community, Jonathan Demme and Ron. And so that having that queer representation is important too. But to hear Ron talk about some of the processes that he was going through in writing the script, even the opera scene, which is one of my faves, not to jump ahead, but the opera scene, he's like, should I write this scene? Isn't this stereotypical to have like a gay man who loves opera? And then he was like, no, maybe, but also, I'm a gay man who loves opera, and this moment in time is a really important moment in time for Tom Hanks, for this character of Andy, to be in something that he loves, an immersion into something that moves him, that he connects to, where we can see this other side of him that's not about him being a lawyer or, being gay, but just being a man who loves art, this kind of art. And so he was like, I got to write it. And then he
Right.
did. He just did it. And then it stayed in.
So, do you, as a queer person, do you enjoy opera? I'm sorry, I
I
didn't
love
mean to catch you while you were drinking. I don't want you to throw up all over your computer.
That's amazing. I actually don't love opera. I appreciate some of the opera that I've heard, but it's not like one of my go-to things. I
Right,
like
right.
I like Broadway musicals,
I
which is
was about to
stereotypical.
say, but you do like musicals.
Musicals, which gay, and also, I love pop music, and I
Right.
love, like, Chapel who's like now she's kind of more mainstream now, but queer artist who's, like transitioned over into mainstream. So I love pop music and I love Broadway musicals. And I also love like music from the 50s, from the 40s and 50s. I love like doo-wop and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because I've discovered that I like musicals, and it's like growing up. If you said, "Do you like musicals?" Like, no, I don't like musicals. That's I don't and the reason I would say that because I don't like the Sound of Music. It's not because I've ever seen it, because I've never seen the Sound of Music. Whenever it starts to come on TV, or if it like when I was younger, if it was on TV or it starts to come on TV, I'm changing the channel because I don't want to deal with that. But I love I love The Wizard of Oz. I love The Wiz. And it's like I'm not cognizant that these are also musicals. So and then all of the Disney animation, all of those are musicals. And it's like I'm not, oh wait a minute, these are all musicals. I guess I'm a musical dude. Now I know. Some of my favorite soundtracks are musicals. So that's what I've discovered about myself. But also it's kind of, I've seen somewhere somebody wrote something about criticizing the movie because it was I think it's also in the trivia, but they talked about they didn't like gay people listening to opera because it being in the movie because it was stereotypical. But it's kind of weird trying to navigate a thing about maybe a group of people and what is stereotypical about them, like what is authentic and what is stereotypical, and how do you be authentic with and avoid the stereotypes. And sometimes you can't, because it's not just the stereotype is about that people. It's like there's a stereotype about Black people liking fried chicken, but the thing about it is like everybody likes fried chicken. It's not just Black people, but for some reason Black people get stereotyped with liking fried chicken. And so they you got some people that want to avoid that stereotype. So it's kind of strange trying to navigate that.
Yeah, and I think that the studio had a lot of pressure with Philadelphia to make sure they were doing it right for that universal appeal, right? And the universal appeal wasn't even just hitting the straight people who were maybe homophobic, but it was also about like hitting the queer community and making sure that they were doing right by the queers. And I think it was just like a lot of pressure to try to figure out how to and every single thing right. There's always going to be something that's not, but also to your point, I really like what you're saying about, right. A lot of people like opera.
Yeah.
A lot of people like opera. A lot of people eat fried chicken, and because it gets associated with these things doesn't necessarily mean that we can't ever have a movie where like a gay man isn't listening to a gay person listens to opera. Like, I don't think that's the answer.
Right.
I think it's about, does it fit his character? Is it true? Is it authentic to Andy? Is that right for him? And is there something we can show through this moment in time with him listening to this aria? And being in that space with Denzel, that very intimate space with him, does this move the story? Does this give us a glimpse into their characters outside of the courtroom? It doesn't move something. It doesn't move us. And for me, the answer is a solid yes.
Yeah, like absolutely.
So well. It's one of my top 5s.
And we're almost there. Just
yes. We want to talk about music, right?
Yeah.
The music, original music is by Howard Shore and Bruce Springsteen. And Shore did music for Pieces of a Woman, Funny Boy, Crimes of the Future, and The Pale Blue Eye. And I don't know any of those.
No, neither do I.
Okay. But there's beautiful original composition in the, like, I can hear some of the theme that rolls throughout the movie. I can hear it. It's that it's memorable. You can take it with you from this movie. And then, of course, the song. So Bruce Springsteen's Streets of Philadelphia, which won the Academy Award. So Philadelphia won 2 Oscars, one for Tom's performance and then for Best Original Song. And they wanted to start the movie with like a guy singing something to open to try to get people's attention. And they were like, they wanted Neil Young, they got Neil Young, and what they got from Neil Young was a song that would not work for the opening credits because it's so emotionally, it's a slow song and it's emotionally driven. And Streets of Philadelphia is very emotional as well, but it's much more of like a kind of a rock type of a song. It's really good, and it pans over the streets of Philadelphia with actual just like people living in Philly, and he goes into Jonathan's going into like a fish market, and people are waving to him, and it's just kind of like this is a moment on the streets of Philadelphia in 1993, and this is all going on out here, and then what's also going on is this epidemic, and
Yeah.
so it's this juxtaposition of like you know the city of brotherly love where there's all this beauty and there's all this community and then there's also this really horrific thing that is like terrorizing and plaguing. It's a plague basically,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's going on at the same time. And I think Streets of Philadelphia represents all of that in a way that's it's actually just like a really good song. Like I'm into it. I'm into the soundtrack. The soundtrack's great. There's the Indigo Girls are on the soundtrack, like Peter Gabriel. It's got some good stuff on there. I used to have it on cassette tape. I would listen to it on my Walkman. So
Oh,
that's
that's
how long
awesome.
ago
I never even thought to look for the soundtrack. Now I got to check it out.
it
um,
is. Really
also, The Streets of Philadelphia is also a hopeful sounding song. Like it sounds
good.
hopeful. Like it sounds like it's kind of praising the city and the people of the city, and it's kind of like an anthem, something
Mhm.
to aspire to. So yeah, it's a great way to open up this film because this film is kind of a tragedy. So it opens up with a hopeful beat. So that's it for the opening credits, and now I have some announcements, and one of the announcements that I have is that I've been saying over and over again that I'm going to open up this eBay store, and I hadn't done it yet, but I'm closer to doing it. So I'm closer now than I was the last time I made this announcement. So now people listening to this is like, he keeps saying he's going to do it, and he doesn't do it. I swears it. I'm close to doing it. So just keep your eyes open for that. And then, I have an appearance on another podcast called Watch Skip Plus. Now, I don't normally do reviews or talk about current movies. This movie is about, me reminiscing about the past, or me and a very special guest just talking about the movies of yesteryear. But yesterday, I recorded a show with the great guys over there, and it was Alex and Jose, and we talked about Beetlejuice. And so if you want to know my thoughts on the movie, you can go and check out that podcast. I think that it's coming out this week. And yeah, it was a wonderful recording. So have you seen that movie, Beetlejuice, Emily?
I haven't. I'm going this week though. I can't wait to go see it and then listen to what your thoughts are when the podcast comes out. That's so great. It looks
Yeah.
so good. I mean, it's a sequel. Come on.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
And
I'm ready for it.
if you want to talk about, well, if you want to listen to a show that talks about modern movies, that's a great place to start because they review a lot of the movies that are coming out, and a lot of the movies they're talking about, they're like the smaller movies. Like people are always talking about what they don't want to see sequels or remakes or reboots or movies of that nature. And I don't understand animosity towards that. I'm totally loving all of those movies. I'm the only thing I'm looking for is a good story, and if I can get a good story from a reboot or an original movie, I'm going to take it. But they're very eclectic with the movies that they talk about. So it's they can go on and talk about totally original movies, and sometimes they'll talk about a reboot or a remake. So it all depends on what they're looking to cover on their show. So yeah, and so if you haven't checked it out, then go check that out. So that's it for the announcements, and we're going to go to the next segment. We're going to talk about our 5 favorite parts. So Emily, you've hinted at what some of your favorite parts are. Why don't you start us off? Give us one of your 5 favorite parts.
Okay, I did. I hinted at La Mama Muerta, which is the aria that um, this beautiful scene happens after the Halloween party, and it's just the two of them, Tom Hanks and Denzel, and he they're trying to prep for tomorrow because the next day Tom is going to be Andy's going to be on the stand. And Denzel just keeps trying to he's like, "Come on, man. We have to, like, do the Q&A. We gotta practice the Q&A." And Tom just goes right into this he's just taken over by the music and, closes his eyes, and the way it's shot, there's this beautiful kind of red that happens, in the lighting that changes and the way that it really is this sense of it's just the 2 of them, and the whole world around them almost closes out. And Denzel just sees this again, these other parts of him come to life, this human who is dying, actively dying, but who is a man who loves music, who loves opera, who understands the story of losing everything, the story of the fire burning down, but through the fire burning down, this is the story that's happening in the opera, burning down the house and her losing everything. She still wants life and she still wants love. And that's who he is and what he wants. And Denzel is just seeing this for a totally different in a totally different way, and then goes home to his wife and or goes home to his baby first. That baby is the cutest damn baby ever, by
Right.
daughter. So cute. But anyway, he picks her up and just hugs and loves on her and then puts her down and then crawls into bed with his wife and just puts his arm around her. And I think in this moment I feel from him this sense of gratitude for being able to be with her and being able to have this partnership and have this life together, just starting out with this child, just starting this next chapter for the 2 of them, um, and understanding Andy in a different way. And when I saw it in the movie theater, I was audibly crying. And every time I see it, and I've seen this movie hundreds of times, not exaggerating on it, I still can't help but I lose my breath, especially on the last part on the high notes of Maria Callas. Like I'd lose my breath and I choke up and I just am very emotional around it. It's just a very powerful scene. That's one of mine.
Yeah. It's also one of mine. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously not as emotionally affected as you are. But
You're
yeah,
not.
but for me it's how powerful Andrew is in that moment. It's like he loses, like, this is after their costume party, and he
Mhm.
kind of loses himself in the music, and the entire scene, like the way you had mentioned, the way it's shot, the lighting changed, the way it's shot is changed, and Andrew draws Joe Miller into his world, like he draws him in. And the whole it's like he's explaining this opera, he's translating the opera from Italian to English and explaining the meaning of what the singer is trying to express, and he's powerfully emotional in that moment. And Tom Hanks is like, he's just really, it's like he's lost. He's like, you don't really see Tom Hanks anymore. Now the only thing you see is Andrew Beckett, and
That's
that's a powerful moment. And Denzel, or Joe Miller, he kind of realizes that, because I think part of the question and answering is just getting the witness emotionally prepared for the trial, right? And I think Joe realized in that moment, oh, he's ready. He's actually ready to do this. This rehearsal is superfluous and that's unnecessary, right? And he's I think Joe is vulnerable in that moment, and he himself is unable to continue, right? So that's when
Mhm.
he kind of he taps out and he kind of goes home, and he was going to go back, and then he realizes that no, he's just going to go home.
Yeah. Yeah. He can't.
Yeah, yeah. So what's another one of your favorite parts?
Another one of my favorite scenes is before the trial starts, Andy goes back to his it's his parents' like 50th anniversary wedding anniversary or something like that, and he goes back home and it's this party for his parents and it's all his family is there. He's got some brothers, he's got a sister and just extended family. It's a really sweet scene that's a lot of filmed through somebody else's camera, like a camcorder that somebody's carrying
Yeah,
around.
yeah, yeah.
what's so beautiful about it to me is he sits down with him and he just says point blank, and Miguel is sitting next to him, Antonio, and he just says, through this trial, there might be some really hard things for you all to hear. And basically, I want to just check in with you about that. And every single one of the brothers starts, and these are like masculine dudes, okay? Like these are like stereotypical masculine dude, white guys. And they're like, we don't care. We love you. Whatever you need from us, we're here. And then the sister says the same thing. I'm just worried about the parents, and the parents and his dad says to him, like, I love you and I'm so proud of you. And, the mom is like, I taught you to stand up for yourself. And every single person in his family is unconditionally loving him and supporting him in what is about to come. But also you get the sense that this is how they are. When so many people that I know in my life in the queer community, we just don't have that. We didn't have that. And our coming out stories are, a lot of us have really, really horrible experiences and still don't have relationships with some of our family members because of who we are. And to see this family loving him unconditionally, and Miguel, and they're like, we're here for you and Miguel, like bringing in, a lot of times like partners can also be kind of erased. Like, oh, well, that's just your friend, your
Yeah,
roommate you
yeah,
live with.
yeah, yeah. They're pretending like they're not having sexual
Right.
relations.
No, that's his husband. Right. They couldn't legally get married then, but
Yeah,
that's his husband.
right.
And everybody is seeing it as such. And that is such a powerful scene for me. And I get waterworks every time. I'm crying through this whole movie. So it's basically that. Can't
Yeah.
help it. But
Uh,
that's really powerful scene for me. Yeah.
yeah, and I have to concur. That's also another one of my favorite parts because
Oh,
the note that I wrote down when I saw the scene is, I love the Becketts. I love how so supportive they are. It's like
yeah.
everybody should have a family like the Becketts when they just can get a total un you know an unending amount of love and support from the family members when they're going through some trying times, because he's kind of trying to warn them that they're going to get some of the backlash, and it's like they don't care because they know that he's fighting for essentially his right to be a human being, right, his right to exist. That's what he's fighting for, and every one of them has stepped up to support him, and they're willing to take on whatever backlash might come his way, and bounce onto them. And so that's an incredible moment, and I really enjoyed that. And I like how it started off with the camera perspective, because the aspect ratio of the screen clips of him when he was growing up, I was like, no, this is actually happening right now. Somebody's filming this now on their camcorder, this
Yeah.
event where he has his get together with his family. So yeah, that was an incredibly powerful moment, and I love how they kind of wrapped their arms around him and enveloped him, and made sure that he knew that they were behind him 100%.
It's so beautiful and powerful. More families like that in the world, please.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So,
um,
what's another one?
oh, another one. Yeah. So another one for me is the library scene, which we had mentioned earlier with the librarian. But what I love about the librarian scene, which is really funny for me to say, is I love the way that Denzel eats his sandwich in that's
The way he eats it from the corner first. I thought that was
he
weird.
sneaks it in because he's not supposed to be eating in the library. So he's doing this. I mean, this is what I love about Joe's character, is that he's he's always kind of like doing what he's not quite supposed to be doing. Like he pushes limits and boundaries and
Yeah,
things, and
yeah, yeah.
that's why he ends up being one of the reasons he ends up being the perfect person to work with Andy on his case. But that scene of him, like, and then he takes a bite and then he like kind of like puts his mouth together like, what do you mean nothing to see here? There's no sandwich that's like crowded in my mouth right now. I love that part because what's going on is this terrible moment with the librarian who's being openly discriminatory toward Andy and saying, "Don't you want to go to the research room? Don't you want to go to the back room?" And Andy's like, "No, I'm good right here." And then he's like, "Would it make
Right.
you more comfortable?" And he's like, "No, but would it make you more comfortable?" And Denzel is just watching this and watching this and watching this, you know, clandestinely in a funny way eating the sandwich, and then finally he comes over and interrupts the energy of the thing without saying, "Hey, you can't talk to that guy that way." That's what
Right,
I'd love
right,
for him
right.
to say, but in Joe's way, Joe's not gonna say that. That's not true to his character. Joe's just gonna kinda come over and make his presence known, and then you can see his internal battle of like, do I stay and talk to him and try to help him and figure this out? Or do I just say hello and get out of here? And he
Right,
hovers a
right.
little bit and then he makes the decision. And he makes the decision to sit down and ask him questions. And that's what's
Yeah.
all off. So that whole scene of it shows so much about Joe, um, and how he gets to where he ends up getting to be able to really like lean in and help him. And also just the funny sandwich eating, which is just so
Yeah, so we're picking this earlier when you see Joe. I don't know if it's before or after he eats the sandwich, and I wasn't even sure if eating sandwiches was allowed in the library because I'm thinking that well maybe it's is a type of library that allows eating. I'm not exactly sure, but he's definitely doing it unabashedly and it's secure in what he's
yeah.
doing. But what I liked is that so he's sitting there, he's reading his law books, he's studying, and then this white dude, he kind of comes in the periphery and he's walking walking past where Joe is reading and just kind of staring at him. And then you get the feeling that he's staring at him because he doesn't think Joe is supposed to be there.
Mhm.
Right. And Joe feels this. He can tell when he's being judged, right? And judged unfavorably. And so the guy doesn't say anything. He just kind of walks out. And then later on, that's when he notices Andrew at the other table having to deal with this uh problematic librarian, this goon librarian, the goon. And 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 I think at that moment he understands and realizes the prejudice that he just had to deal with is the same prejudice that not only is he projecting onto gay people, but the thing that Andrew is currently experiencing, that same type of prejudice, but more overtly, more forcefully, right? And Andy is trying to handle it, but at the same time, the library goon won't let it go. Like he doesn't want to go away. He's still trying to, because he's not trying to get him out, like completely out of the building. He wants him to go to like a private study room where people didn't have to look at him, because at this point, Andrew is more advanced in his sickness, so you can like he's very pale, and you can see some of the lesions, and the librarian is basically trying to hide him from the other people in the library. So and that's when Joe comes over and basically offers an assist. And this is where he changes his mind, because this is before Joe was like the last person to reject Andrew. And so when Joe comes over, he asks him, well, who'd you find? Who'd you find represent you? Did you get a lawyer? And Andrew says, I'm a lawyer. And I think at that point, that's when Joe changed his mind, because at one point he realizes that Andrew is facing prejudice, and the same type of prejudice that he faces.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I think there was something in him where he could not let this man try to represent himself
Mhm.
against one of the most powerful law firms in
Exactly.
Philadelphia.
No chance. There was no chance. And also he could see that he was getting
Yeah.
sicker and that he
Yeah. Yeah.
or like wasn't
Yeah.
gonna be able to make it through with his health as well.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
I think at that moment his heart absolutely opened up to Andrew, and that's where they formed their what turns out to be a lifelong partnership.
It is.
It just kind of it's kind of sad and funny at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. So,
So what's your next favorite part?
well, I'm kind of now moving towards the end of the film where they just won the case. So sorry, spoilers, they did win. Um, and it's such a powerful, important moment, and you know, sadly, Andy isn't there to see it in the courtroom because he's in the hospital, and it's his kind of last night in the hospital, and then Miguel's going to take him home so he can pass it home. And when Denzel visits him, he brings, champagne and he's so excited. And he tells him, come sit next to me. And then he tells him a joke. And then they have a moment together and he tells him, good work and thank you. And then he reaches, Andy needs his oxygen mask, which has been lowered so he can talk. And Andy's kind of reaching toward it and struggling to get it. And without even thinking, Joe just puts the mask on him and kind of like tenderly almost secures it behind his ears to make sure he's going to be able to breathe and that he's okay and safe for that moment. And it is genuine, it is organic without thought, not like am I gonna, not back to the beginning where they handshake and he says he has AIDS and then he backs away across the room like we were saying.
Right.
Such a juxtaposition from that to this is where he's come to. He's come to this place of, no, I just, you're an incredible human and I love you. And, I'm going to, of course, be able to help you without a thought. In it.
Yeah.
And that to
Yeah.
me is a beautiful scene and it's really powerful. And of course, there's that humor in it of the joke. And it's just a really sweet moment. And then everybody clears out and then it's just Andy and Miguel, which I also love because it's just right. That's the two of them. That's his husband. That's his life partner. And he
Yeah.
tells him I'm ready, which means he's ready to go. And it's that whole scene is really powerful to me.
All right. So do you believe when he said he was ready that Andy had disconnected him from the life support in some kind of way? Or was Andy being prophetic in that he knew that he was going to die?
It's a great question. I think it remains a little bit ubiquitous. Like it's not clear.
Yeah.
I kind of read it as both. And there's never clarity of like, does he make a decision about ending his life at that point? Or does he just know he's going to die and telling Miguel, I'm ready for this when this happens? It's not totally clear to me, but
Yeah.
but that's okay. What was your take on it?
At first I was thinking that because I was thinking both ways about it. I was thinking, did Miguel disconnect him from the life support? And I was like, and then I was thinking, he's not really on life support.
Yeah.
Like he's not like somebody who's brain dead that's on that type of life support. He doesn't have like a trach going down his throat or anything like that. So I don't think that there was anything to disconnect Andy from. And I don't think that, I don't think Miguel has the strength to murder Andy. I don't think that happened either. I think that Andy was just being prophetic and telling, he was letting Miguel know that he was ready to go. Like it was okay, right? So, and he was preparing Miguel for what Andy knew what was about to happen. I'm getting all emotional talking about this. So yeah, that was my reading of it. That was the conclusion I think that I drew from that moment.
Yeah.
But as far as one of my favorite moments, it's not the top 5, although that was incredibly impactful. So I want to take it back to near the beginning and kind of throughout the movie. It was I don't know if you noticed that on the internet, people have been saying, explain it to me like I'm a 2-year-old or 3-year-old or 4-year. Have you seen that?
No,
Yeah, I've been seeing that on the internet, and it's funny, right? Because I don't think people know that it came from this movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think it was the first one. So I'm going to put that phrase. That's one of my favorite moments of the movie. My favorite thing about the movie. So I think I'm trying to look at it. See when he first used it on a client, and I'm trying to figure out the order of events. Hold on a second. I think the first time he says it is when he says, explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old. Right? So, and then when he talks to Andy, he's like, explain it to me like I'm a 2-year-old. So he's kind of arbitrarily choosing child ages. So the first time he says it is, he says, explain this to me like I'm a 2-year-old, which you're about to cross the street. No, there's a hole in the street.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a manhole. It's open. And then they got clothes around it. It's clearly marked. And you need to cross the street right here. No other point on the street.
Yeah.
and you fall in the hole. And then he's like, yeah.
And it's so funny, right? It's so funny. But then Andy comes in and explains all of the stuff where it's obvious that he was discriminated against. And he's like, yeah,
Right, right.
right. So there's that juxtaposition.
Yeah, and then he says, "I don't think you have a case." Like, come on, man.
Mhm.
It's like, but he's honest about it. He's
Yeah.
like, you doing this, you don't want to accept it for personal reasons. And Joe says, "You're right. I am not." So it's not like he's being dishonest or he's being two-faced about it. He's honest in saying that he's uncomfortable
Mhm.
taking on Andrew's case because Andrew is gay and has AIDS. But then he's able to go overcome that later on. And I think Joe is the proxy for the audience because
Yeah.
the people who made, like, the director, like Jonathan, knows who's going to watch this movie or the people he's trying to reach.
Yeah.
So he's pointing a finger at the audience like, this is you and this is how you act. Now, how do you feel about yourself? Like, you look at the mirror and see if you're happy with what you see. Because I think that a lot of people would have had that instinct, or because this is kind of like after the main crux of AIDS. This is more like this more depicts AIDS the way it was kind of like in the 80s. I think in the 90s, people have started to be understanding that AIDS wasn't a disease that you can get from touching people, but there were still people out there who believed that. And I think there are people today that still believe that, right? So it's something that kind of takes a while to get over. And I think by having Joe as a proxy for the audience, it kind of helped change people's mind. It just same way that Joe was able to change his mind about Andrew and AIDS and the social injustice that's going on. The audience should be able to also change their minds. So that was one of the things. And then connected to this is it's really Andrew's attitude toward Joe, because in the very first scene they're kind of like arguing this case,
Yeah.
and then they get into the elevator, and then and then when Andrew leaves the elevator, he tells there's actually a dude with crutches that gets in the elevator with him, and then Andrew leaves and he says, "Is that one of your clients?" And then Joe was like, "Ha ha, that's very funny," and then tries to get that guy with the crutches as a client. Like, he's like, here's my business card, call me if you have any problems. I'm a lawyer. I can help, get you money for your, it's because that's exactly who he is. It's like he and on one time he's kind of offended that he's been identified as an ambulance chaser, but he can't not get clients, right? He can't.
It's like, okay, you're the TV guy, dude. You're the TV guy trying to get clients. You're the ambulance.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, so the thing with the 6-year-old, the 2-year-old thing, that's one of my favorite parts.
And there's a nice callback when the jurors are all meeting and talking
yes.
the case, and they call back that, and they say, he's like, lays all out, and one of the jurors says, like, now explain that to me, like I'm a 2-year-old or whatever he says.
Right. Yeah, what he lays out is that let's say I got a mission. I need to get a pilot to fly over to enemy territory, and this is the hardest mission that any pilot has to do. Now, am I going to get like a brand new pilot that hasn't seen much combat just to see if he's going to live up to the occasion, or do I get my best guy, my top gun, my veteran pilot to fly this most important mission? Yeah, I just don't see it. Explain it to me like I'm a 2-year-old. I do like that. And it's like when the guy's in the courtroom and explaining why he gave this most important case to an attorney that he felt was subpar doesn't make any sense. Like, this is your most important case. You don't give it to somebody who you think is a nincompoop.
And they had just
I don't see how anybody would buy that.
Exactly. And they had just promoted him 10 days earlier. I mean, the whole thing is obviously, yeah, it's so obvious. That's a good one. Yeah, the comedic stuff in there that Joe does and what he brings, he really brings it. It's great. It's good writing.
Yes, absolutely. So I think that was the fourth one you had.
Or
maybe there's am I
wrong?
More. What was your fifth?
Okay,
your fifth scene.
Of course, I can't just have one. The first is when the Neil Young song plays at the memorial. That makes me just hyperventilate cry every time. Because also I've been to a lot of AIDS memorials of people who have died, who are my friends in my community, and it just reminds me of that. And also, I'm very invested in Andy, and I know it's a beautiful celebration of his life and everyone coming together, but it's a beautiful and hard, and the song is perfect for it. Neil Young's song is great, and it just like pulls at my heart every time. So there's that one, and then there's also a random one, which I wanted to just mention, which is when they're in the courtroom, and Anna Deavere Smith is on the, stand, and I don't know what her name
Yeah.
is in the movie, I'm sorry, I forget, but she's obviously, like, an incredible playwright and activist, and, was a is and but she's just, like, an incredible artist, and, wrote a lot about the Rodney King stuff when it was going on the year before, and wrote a play about that. But she talks about her earrings because she was like, he asked, "Have you ever been discriminated
Yeah.
against at the firm?" She works at Wyatt Wheeler, Hellman, Tello and Brown. And she says, "Yes, I was told that my earrings were too ethnic and not American enough." And she said that they are American, they're African American. And I just love that. I love the way she delivers it. And I love that there's like little snickers in the courtroom, enough to where the judge is just like, "Hey, everybody, like, stop." It's too much. But it's perfect, right? It's this perfect thing, and to have her be the one who says it, this incredible actor and activist, is really powerful for me. I just love that she's in the movie, and it reminds me of all the powerful women who were part of have always been part, and especially like lesbian women who have always been part of AIDS activism and also working behind the scenes to help the queers in the community. Um, even the scene when he's got lesions on his face, and they're trying to cover it with makeup. And what you got
Yeah.
in that moment is a woman who's part of his queer community doing his makeup. You've got two guys who are there helping him with his files. You got someone coming over delivering groceries. You've got the queer community shows up, and women have always showed up, and lesbians have always showed up to be a huge part of the movement. And I just think like
Right.
Anna
Right.
Deavere Smith, like, to me, is representative of that, even though she's not outwardly like an AIDS activist in the movie. She has that sense of like, what is going to be socially just is what's important here, and I want to remind you of that. And that's just who she is moving through the world. So I wanted to just take a
Yeah.
second to like honor her and love her, because I really do. And yeah, my Neil Young. So those are my tie for five. Tie for
Right.
fifth
Right.
place. How about you?
Excellent choices. Before I give mine, I just wanted to go back to the makeup scene that you had mentioned. So
Mhm.
what was funny about that was like he was saying, "Isn't this too orange?" Because she was putting on foundation, and he says, "Isn't this too orange?" And I just had flashback of the last like 6 years of having an orange president. So it's just
Yeah, Sweden was rough. No, it was. I felt that way too rewatching it. I was like,
yeah, it's like when you first watched the movie, it didn't really mean that much except for a person who is really into makeup. But now when you watch it, it's almost triggering. But she had to explain to him that it's the best color to cover up the lesion. So yeah, that was interesting.
mhm.
That I felt that way about that scene.
Yeah, it's funny.
But one of my favorite parts is it's a really small part, but I really like it. It's when it's when Joe's baby is being born. Like he's in the hospital
Yes.
with his wife, and he has the old school camera where you had to put film in it or whatnot, and she just had the baby, like it just came out of her, and he runs out of film, so he's trying to change the film in the camera, and he can't quite do it. So having just had the baby and then now trying to handle the baby, now he has to handle the baby, she has to handle the baby and fix the camera for him because he can't quite do it. She has to put the film in the camera for him so that he can take more pictures. It's like, come on, dude. At the very least, you could change the film and the camera. Like she shouldn't have to give birth to the baby, hold the baby, and then change the film on the camera. I thought that was one of the funniest
Isn't
scenes. It was
that
so
what women
impactful.
always do? I mean, women are always like having to
It's
multitask and like think these
it's
things
kind of a
through.
real
It's a
moment.
real
Yeah,
moment. It's
absolutely.
a real
Yeah,
moment.
it's kind of a
Hmm.
it reminds me of me.
Yeah. That's really funny.
Yeah, there have been moments when I've been that guy,
That's
right? It's
great.
just
That's
like,
great. That's so
I know you're
honest.
handling so many things, but I can't do this one little
Mhm.
minor task, and I need you to handle that
Mhm.
right now.
Yeah. That's great. And she doesn't even think twice about it. She just like gets it from
Yeah,
him, does it
yeah,
real quick, and then
yeah.
hands it back and doesn't even almost love that scene. That's a great
Right,
call out. Good scene. Good choice.
right. And also I like her character because there's another scene where it's like Joe's kind of explaining his homophobia, his
Mhm.
discomfort with homosexuals in general. And then I think he asked his wife, if she knew anybody who was gay. And she lists all these people that he didn't know, that he knew that he didn't know that were gay, right?
Aunt Teresa, the guy who is redoing our kitchen shelves. She's just like
Right,
naming all these people, and he's like,
right.
"What? I can't believe
And it's not that they're hiding it.
no,
It's just that he's not conscious.
he's
It's
not
almost
tracking."
like they have to be almost flamboyantly gay for him to even know that they're a person that might be gay.
Yeah,
So yeah, that was a very interesting scene. But like I said, not it's something that sticks out, but not one of my favorite ones. But I just wanted to mention that. But yeah, that was great. I'm glad. Thank you for sharing that.
thank
I
you.
really appreciate that. I'm pretty sure that the one listener that we have is really enjoying it.
Hopefully,
I'm
there's more
super
folks
kidding.
who love Philadelphia. I hope so. And even if you're
Oh no,
listening,
this is a
it's a fantastic movie. It really is.
yeah, it
It
is.
really holds up
Yeah,
to, even though it's dated now in some ways, in a lot of ways it's not. And especially with legislation that we have against LGBTQ folks, especially trans folks now, it's like we're going back. So these moments in time, history repeats itself. These moments in time really matter, and this movie captures a really specific and important moment that sadly isn't too far off from where we are in some ways now as we go back. And so hold on, it's also just like very well acted and so good.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's not just courtroom drama, which sometimes I can be bored by. It's really not. There's so much more there to have.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I happen to love courtroom
You
dramas,
do.
but
I do too. I do too for the most part, but I'm not always in the mood for that. But this movie
yeah, yeah, yeah,
offers a
yeah.
lot more outside of the courtroom. Sometimes courtroom
Right, right,
dramas are
right.
just like you're in the courtroom and you're like, oh my God,
Right, right.
this is
Yeah,
more.
when you have a real courtroom drama, you have to have that I want the truth moment. Like
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
we're looking
We
for.
can't handle you can't handle it. Yeah.
either that, either that, or the Perry Mason moment where the witness says, "I had to do it.
Oh,
Don't you see?"
hey, that was really good. I love your impressions. You're so good. I know you're like an illustrator and like an artist in that regard, but I'm digging your impressions. Do you think about like
Yeah,
for the world of performance? Do you perform?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I do dabble in it a
That's
little
so
bit.
cool. That's great.
But that's it for our five favorite parts, and we're going to head on to the top 10 trivia. As you know, I get most of my trivia from IMDb, and it is mostly correct. And I didn't do like the double research that I do, like checking on to see if the trivia in IMDb is consistent with the same trivia that might be elsewhere. So I'm going to start us off with the trivia. So the first one I have is the moment when Mary Steinberger's character says that she hates the case was improvised in the moment. When the actress expressed her hate towards her role after shooting the mirror scene, and Jonathan Demme encouraged her to incorporate it into the role so that the woman would seem more human. I'm like, yeah, that would, and it didn't strike me as something that where she actually hated her character, which is you don't normally hear actors express that about the characters they're playing. Usually what they'll say is that they try to get into their character's head and they try to understand like their motive, and they try to embarrass, because nobody sees themselves as the villain, right? So they try to embody that part of the character. But Mary was like, this is just a horrible human being and I don't like it, right?
And it shows her humanness. That was what we were talking about earlier about Jason Robards too, right? It's like there's some
Yeah,
humanness despite the evil, and Mary, and what we know about Mary and Ted and their politics and everything, it's like I know I have a son. I know her and she's an activist, and
right,
we know kind of collectively that she's not that villain.
right.
And so for her to say that just totally makes sense to me. And I love that it was improv, and I love that they kept it in. I think those moments, sometimes improvised moments in movies that are just really coming from the place of the character and Mary and her complicated relationship with it. But also
Yeah,
maybe the character's complicated relationship with the case too. Can be
yeah,
really
yeah,
powerful to be kept in. So I think that's really, really cool that you learned that. I like
yeah.
that piece of trivia a lot.
I think that it kind of changes her character a little bit. It changes from a character that who's just doing it because she shares those beliefs, to a character who is just doing a job. She doesn't share those beliefs, but she's doing a job, and her job is to, win the case for these people. And so she has to pull out all the stops, and she hates the type of things that she has to do in order to win this case. But, she's got a job to do, and that's what the job calls for. The job calls for her to question a man's sexual behavior and to try to discredit him and to make him look bad. And just like, it might be why they got a woman lawyer to do this, because that what they
Exactly.
believe that would have more impact. So yeah, that's fascinating. She changed her character to a character that she could like a little bit more.
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think good call out on them choosing a woman and also a black man as well. If you notice, those are the two main
Yeah, yeah.
lawyers, and you're like,
Co-counsel.
okay, there's a
Yeah.
reason why you guys did that. Um,
Right, right,
mhm.
right.
Yeah. The second one is that Tom Hanks had to lose almost 30 pounds in scenes as he was getting so sick. And Denzel Washington, on the other hand, was asked to gain a few pounds for his role. And Washington, to the chagrin of Hanks, who practically starved himself for the role, would often eat chocolate bars in front of him. And I love that so much because, again, it's like the playfulness of the characters as they're building the relationship as characters, but also off screen. This is what's happening. Like they're just like
Yeah, yeah.
throwing jokes and shade at each other, and I love that. And this is real. You were saying about IMDb or whatever, but I did hear Denzel talk about this in an interview. So he did do this,
Right, right.
which is
Yeah, yeah.
so funny to know about, and just thinking about how to kind of put that in his face, like, "I know this is hard for you to
Right.
do, and you're working really hard on this, and, like, look what I get to do." It's just funny. It's just funny. I like it.
Also, Tom Hanks has this thing where he's just one of those actors who can lose and
Mhm.
gain a massive amount of weight for the
Yes.
role. And I was like, that's an incredible thing to do. Like, most Americans are struggling with weight control, and these actors can practically do it on command. It's like, can you lose 30 pounds in 8 months? And they're like, sure, yeah, I got it. I just won't eat. And it's like, there are a lot of people that don't have that control where and that could cause
It
issues
could.
with health, right? It's
Yes.
not exactly a safe thing to do.
No.
But I guess if you have the right type of people, right? If you have the right team, you can do that sort of thing. I don't think it's something that's recommended that you just do it on your own.
No.
That seems kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, and Tom talked about having, like, a really good trainer and nutritionist, so he was being monitored
Yeah.
and watched and things like that through the whole process, and there's a significant difference between the beginning and the end of the movie. I mean, he's really thin, he's really sickly
Yeah.
looking,
Yeah.
and it's effective, and I think about, like, Joaquin Phoenix and doing similar things of
Yeah.
losing and
Yeah.
gaining for different roles and Joker stuff, and, um yeah, we have to be careful with that, but also it is very realistic, as to what was
Yeah.
happening in the illness. So, even though I think it can be problematic to have people gain and lose weight in certain ways and reinforce weird ideas about people's bodies that is really hard and complicated. I also think for this role, it was really effective and appropriate um, and also again, yeah, funny about the chocolate bars.
Absolutely. Up next, according to a 1994 Entertainment Weekly profile of Ron Walter by Stephen Schaefer, Jonathan Demme had convinced TriStar Pictures to hire Walter to play Bob Sedman. TriStar wanted Demme to hire someone else because Walter was HIV positive and the insurance company covering the film refused to extend coverage to him. Demme managed to convince TriStar to allow the hiring of Walter anyway because Walter was the character that Demme wanted, and because refusing to hire an actor because of his HIV positive status would be particularly ironic in the context of a movie that is premised on the injustice of a lawyer being fired because he is HIV positive. Like, it's like, how you gonna do that to my man's, right? We're making a movie about discrimination and you wanted to discriminate against him. It don't seem right.
Not at all. And Ron was actually really sick during the filming of the movie, and I think he passed maybe the next year. I think he passed him maybe in '94, if I'm remembering that right. So
He passed the same year that this movie
oh,
was
it was the
released.
same movie.
So this movie was released in 94 and he passed in
Oh
94.
my goodness. So he's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
sick, and Tom, I saw an interview of him talking about how when they were filming, like he was just had like really high fevers, and he could like feel the heat coming from him, and he was sweaty, and I mean he was just working really hard to get it together, and he was in the hospital a lot, like, and then they came and sort of checked in with him and said, no, you can come back, and it was really important to the filmmakers to have him in it, and also. Um, like I said earlier, to have people who were actually living with the disease to be part of the movie as well, to make it more realistic. And also, he's an incredible actor, Ron. Well, I mean, he's like, he's done a lot of stuff, and I'm really glad he was able to do this before he passed. My guess is that it was probably really meaningful to him to be a part of this project.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Um, So another one is that Demme wanted people not familiar with AIDS to see his film, like we've been talking about, and he felt that Bruce Springsteen would bring in an audience that would not ordinarily see a movie about a gay man dying of AIDS. Hey, the movie and the song, The Streets of Philadelphia, did a great deal to increase AIDS awareness and take some of the stigma off the disease. I really think so. I mean, it was played on the VHS tape of the soundtrack, and it's a really good song. It's a really good song.
Yeah.
And it doesn't the lyrics don't shy away from what we're talking about. Like they go into it. And like you said, it's an anthem. It's uplifting too at the same time. And so I think it was really effective in doing what Demi was hoping that it would do. I think it works.
Right, right. Uh yeah, Bruce Springsteen has this veneer, this of authenticity where people think of him as like this blue collar worker
Uh-huh.
who just happened to start singing. But coming from Bruce Springsteen, he never worked a regular job in his life, right? He was always a singer, he was always an artist. So he never, even though he has that air about him, that's not what he did. So I think that, and that's the reason why they believe that he would draw people to this movie and kind of change their hearts and minds about it, is because he had that veneer about him.
Mhm.
So that's
That's
fascinating.
fascinating.
So the script was based partially on the discrimination lawsuit by Jeffrey Bowers, a young lawyer working for a prominent multinational law firm. Like Hank's character, Beckett had visible Kaposi's sarcomas lesions. The directors had decided to fire him in July 1986, 2 months after he received good marks on a routine performance evaluation. His supervisors protested because the board had sidestepped company policy, failing to interview his supervisors, review his client list, or calculate his billable hours. That October, the partners voted again to fire him 1 month after another positive evaluation. Bowers was fired December 4th, 1986, and departed the firm the following day. The case took 6 years to resolve.
Oh my goodness.
So, yes, it was this case, and I think I read another case that they partially drew from that. And then there are similar types of stories that they've been able to that they've been able to find, and they kind of put elements of those true life stories into this movie. But I think Jeffrey Bowers was what they drew the most from, so much so that the Bowers family sued the studio for the movie because I think the original producer that was attached to it, he had interviewed the Bowers, but then he left the project, and he says he don't know what they did. He claimed that they didn't use any of his notes when they wrote the movie, but the Bowers recognized there were things that were happening in the movie that only happened in their family. There's no way that they would have wrote this scene because it was about them. There's like somehow it's their life on the screen, so there's no way it's not about them. So they sued, and I think they settled out of court. The studio settled with them. So I guess everything is copacetic now, but I think that leaves no doubt that there's a large part of this movie that's based on Jeffrey Bowers.
Yeah, and I think that's really hard because it's a story that should be told, right? All of these stories, or an amalgamation of these stories, should be told. But obviously it should be above board how you're doing that sort of thing when it's about
Yeah,
somebody's actual
yeah,
life. And so that's a little bit tricky. And, we don't want exploitation. So I don't love that it happened in that way. But also, it's very important to tell stories like this because there's a lot of them that never went anywhere. People just got fired or were discriminated
yeah,
all the time, and then nothing ever happened because you were too afraid to say something, or whatever, or you were dying. So
yeah.
um, this is actually really, yeah, I'm fascinated by this piece of trivia. Okay. The I did not know this at all. The courtroom scenes were filmed in an actual courtroom that the city let the filmmakers use. It was not a set. That's so cool. It must have just felt even more real and add to the intensity of the moments in the scenes. Do you know where it was or anything about the courtroom?
No, I didn't do any further
Okay, I'm
research
just
on it.
curious.
But that is interesting that
Really?
they used a real courtroom instead of just building a set, which is what they usually do.
Yeah.
But it did. I don't know. I would like to say that it added an air of authenticity, but there's no way I can tell the difference between a real courtroom and a set, right? I'm not that good. It was like, oh, that's a really cool courtroom.
But I
Let's proceed.
but I felt different for the actors. That's what I was thinking. Like if it
Yeah, yeah, it definitely felt different for the
Yeah,
actors.
yeah.
And I think there's a certain amount of challenge because like when you build a set, you're building it specifically so you know where to place the cameras
Mhm.
and where to place the crew and where to place the lights. But if you're using an actual courtroom, then you kind of have to uh you have to jury rig that kind of stuff. You have to kind of do it on the fly. You have to make stuff up and hope that it works. But I think they wanted to bring that emotional weight to the actors and probably to the director himself,
Yes.
uh, in the act of filming in that courtroom.
Mhm. Yeah, totally.
So up next we have originally Jonathan Demme was going to cast a comedic actor in the role of Joe Miller. This is what I kind of alluded to earlier, as he felt it would be a good counterbalance for Tom Hanks, who had already been cast, and to give an audience the it's okay to watch a film about a gay man dying from AIDS. Demme had considered casting either Bill Murray or Robin Williams. But when Denzel Washington showed interest in the role, he gave the role to him instead because Demme had wanted to work with Washington for the past few years. So it's like, oh, you got it. You got it. And that's how Denzel got the role, is because he's like, ooh, I'd like to do this. And Demme was like, sweet, I've always wanted to work with you. Right. So this is a match made in heaven.
It is, and there's this documentary about the behind the scenes of the making of Philadelphia, and Jonathan Demme talks about how he part because Denzel had always been playing these dramatic roles and fantastically. And he was like, so, that's why Bill Murray or Robin Williams was what I was thinking. So how are you with comedy? And then apparently Denzel was just like, I got this. Like, yeah.
Right, right,
And
right,
he
right, right,
does.
right.
He delivers it. And,
Right.
you know, they the casting is really perfect. And I think it would have been different and interesting with one of those people in the role. I think it would have been good in a different way, but
Yeah,
having
yeah.
Denzel, the depth of what Denzel was bringing, and the the authenticity of who Joe was for him is fantastic. So I'm glad they chose that.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
it definitely would have been no, I was just saying it definitely would have been funnier had they got an actual comedian, but at the same time, um Denzel was funny, but not like he was like lightly
Yeah,
funny. I think if they had gotten an actual comedian, they would have made up a lot of their own bits. You would have seen a lot of original
yeah, you're
material.
welcome.
There would have been a lot more ad lib.
Yeah,
But Denzel just brings a kind of gravity to it because, like, when you bring a comedian in it, the audience just sees it as a comedian. Whether, on the other hand, bringing in a dramatic acting in it, who happens to have some, but can do some funny bits. I think that probably works better.
and what a great way to do that with Tom and Denzel. I'm thinking because Tom is he was such a comedic actor, and then he's going into this drama role, and Denzel is such a dramatic actor, and he's going into this comedic role, and they're making
Yeah,
a
yeah,
pill and blending all of that together in one, and that's like so cool. I love that. Um,
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So at the costume party, Andrew and Miguel are both dressed in US military uniforms. And they're so sweet when they're dancing together in the uniforms. It's so beautiful. This is a reference to the fact that when the movie was filmed, there was a total ban on gays and lesbians serving in the US Armed Forces, but Bill Clinton had made a campaign promise to dispense with that ban. Instead, in December 93, Clinton passed a compromise legislation popularly known as Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which allowed for gays and lesbians to serve as long as they didn't tell anyone about their sexual orientation. And that policy remained in place until September 2011. So it was like, that's quite a long time to have Don't Ask, Don't
Yeah,
Tell, to have people who are serving to not be able to talk about basically their lives, right?
right.
And so I think that is a powerful Halloween party. That's a important mirror. That's important kind of light political way they're sort of infusing in right there of like, don't ask, don't tell. Um, and, you know, I have a lot of other thoughts I could share on that. But yeah, I think that's a really important. I think that's a really important piece of trivia, and another important like capturing of the moment of what was happening in 1993 and reflecting it back through the film.
Right, right, right.
Mhm.
Many gay rights activists and historians have credited this film with being the first major motion picture to tackle the AIDS epidemic, bringing awareness to the issue and working towards lessening the stigma of having AIDS. Despite the praise, others have been critical that it took Hollywood over a decade to address the issue. But this is something that is kind of tricky for Hollywood because at one point you're not trying to put out like overt messages, like you're not trying to make message movies and trying to nanny the audience, I guess, into behaving a certain type of way. And the other part of it is that they're trying to make money, so they just don't want to pump out movies and not make money from the movies. So I think this I would have the opposite opinion. I think this is like an outstanding stepping stone with and it takes a director who wants to share this message. This is what he wants to do. So it kind of takes a director and a writer who wants to put forth this message, and basically the studio is kind of capitulating at this point. Just like they're like, if you can promise me some box office receipts, then you can film anything you want, right? That's kind of their their attitude.
Yeah, but it had that personal meaning for Jonathan Demme with his friend who was HIV positive, and
Yeah,
it mattered to him. And I think I agree with you. I think this movie is extremely important and reached a lot of people. It did what it set out to do. And I also hear this piece about like, ooh, it took you a decade to do this. And I think I don't know where this is coming from, but what I would say about it is, the first documented AIDS case is in 1981. So it's over. So it's starting. And then there's this basically a Holocaust, right? There's a epidemic that are killing off hundreds and thousands of people, not just men, women too, trans folks, and no one is doing anything about it. The government is turning a blind eye. Everyone's scared of it. It's pulling up everybody's homophobia and transphobia, and people aren't addressing it. And that's why activism, that's why community came together. That's why the AIDS Memorial Quilt exists. That's why these organizations started popping up and saying, we have to do something because nobody else is doing anything. And we're not seeing our reality reflected back. We're losing everybody and no one's saying anything about it and no one's doing anything about it. The only thing that's being said about it is, oh, it's some gay cancer, right? The early days. It's a gay cancer. Nobody cares. If you are gay, you should die of AIDS. Like these horrible things. And so I can see that the critique of Hollywood, you've got so much power. Could you please do something? We can't get AZT, we can't get drugs that we need in order to try to make it. We're dying off. This is urgent. This is a crisis. And so I can see how, in response to all of that, that they might say, Hollywood, could you do something? And why did it take you so damn long? And so
Right.
that makes sense to me. And in that regard, this movie is right on. It might be a little bit late, but it's in some ways right on
That's
time.
right.
And it did what
That's
it
right. And I
needed to
think
do.
about just to
And
side
could it have
track
been a
for a
little bit
second, I
earlier?
think about
Sure.
my actual favorite
but Hollywood,
movie, aside
like
from
the
Trees
rest of the
Lounge
country
and Twin Peaks,
and the world,
my
but the
actual
rest of
favorite
the
movie of all
country
time is My Own
particularly
Private Idaho,
wasn't
which was
ready.
made in 1991, and it's a
Right.
Gus Van Sant
Right.
movie, and
That's
it's
the
not
other
about AIDS,
factor,
but it's a
is
queer
that
movie
Hollywood
about gay male
itself wasn't
street
ready because they're
hustlers
filled with
starring River Phoenix and Keanu
heterosexual
Reeves, and
males
it makes
that
me think
have these
about
same
that in
type
the
of
way of Brokeback
attitudes,
Mountain
who
2 of like,
probably don't want to greenlight, who
we're just
basically have the
edging
same beliefs
into
and don't
this
want to
territory
greenlight
about talking about
movie that
queerness
would be
in a different
sympathetic
way,
to people
and
that they both
we've got
hate
to
and
have
fear.
these
So
very famous at
that's
that
one of the
time.
reasons why it
River
took so
was
long.
very
The
famous
answer is
already,
almost
and
obvious,
so
right?
Keanu, post Bill and
That's right.
Ted's, etc.
That's right. And I think about, just to
We've got to
side
have these
track for a
guys in
second,
these
I think
roles in
about my
order
actual
for
favorite
people to
movie, aside
watch
from
the
Trees
story that
Lounge
needs to be
and Twin
told.
Peaks.
And
My
even
actual
though it was an
favorite movie
indie
of all
film
time is
and
My
it,
Own
it
Private
only
Idaho, which was
developed
made
a
in
big cult following
1991.
later, that
And it's
seems
a
to be
Gus Van Sant movie.
trend
And
of
it's
things
not
that I
about
love,
AIDS, but
things
it's
that
a queer
develop cult
movie
followings later on.
about gay male
But
street hustlers
that
starring River Phoenix and
that
Keanu
we have to
Reeves. And
have
it makes
these
me think
circumstances
about
in
that
place
in
in
the way of
order for
Brokeback
these
Mountain
movies
2
to
of
be
like,
made.
and we're just edging
to your
into
point, mainstream
this
audiences just
territory
weren't
about
ready
talking about queerness
until
in a
then.
different way. And
So I had
we've
mentioned
got
this
to have
earlier.
these
The
very
last
famous
one
at
is
that
that Jonathan
time.
Demme had
River
stated he
was
was moved
very
to direct
famous
the film
already,
after a
and
friend of
Keanu,
his,
Keanu,
illustrator
post Bill and
Juan
Ted's,
Suarez
etc.
Botas,
Yeah.
was diagnosed with
We've
AIDS.
got to have
And
these guys
that,
in
I
these
think,
roles
was
in
one of
order
his main
for people to
impetuses
watch the
for
story
doing
that
it.
needs
And
to be told.
the
And even though it was an
screenwriter
indie
as
film,
well,
and it
of course,
it
was
only
a gay man
developed a big cult
losing all of
following
his
later,
friends.
that seems to be
And I think, watching this documentary and hearing them talk about it,
later on,
it's like they came together to say, this matters to us, and this is a story that needs to be told. How can we tell it?
Movies to be made.
We've been personally affected by this.
To your point,
And-
mainstream audiences
and
just weren't ready.
A lot of people were
until
personally
then.
affected by it. So
Right.
I'm glad
So I had
that they
mentioned
did.
this earlier.
And
The last one is that Jonathan Demme
and
had
that
stated he was moved
I
to
think
direct the film
him
after a
having
friend of
this
his,
friend
illustrator Juan
and having
Suarez
the personal
Botas,
experience
was diagnosed with
led-
AIDS, and
led
that I
it-
think was one of his main
led the filmmaking
impetuses
and
for
even the
doing it. And,
screenwriter experiences
the
with it in his
screenwriter
life
as well
led
of course,
them
was
to write
a gay man losing all of his friends. And I think, watching this documentary and hearing them talk about it, it's like they came together to say, this matters to us, and this is a story that needs to be told. How can we tell it? We've been personally affected by this, and a lot of people were personally affected by it. So I'm glad that they did, and that I think him having this friend and having the personal experience led the filmmaking and even the screenwriter experiences with it in his life led them to write something that was extremely heartfelt, and really powerful and really
character driven.
Right. I can feel that. You can kind of sense how personal this film is, and the director made it personal, and he did the job. He made us feel for the type of person that a lot of the audience had misgivings about, shall we say,
Yeah.
or they just didn't know about. Like, people just don't know. They don't know. They don't understand, and people have a tendency to fear what they don't understand.
That's right.
And what this movie did was that it kind of gave you some information in order to change your mind about what you might be feeling. So yeah, and have some empathy for people who are threatened by this dangerous disease. So yeah, he did it.
Yeah.
So that's it for the trivia, and now we're going to talk about critic stars. So the critics on IMDb have it at 81%. The audience score is 89%. On Rotten Tomatoes, and on IMDb reviews, it's at 7.7 out of 10. So I've gathered some critics to see what they might be thinking about the film. So the first critic is Eleanor O'Sullivan. She writes for Asbury Park Press, New Jersey. And she wrote, Tom Hanks is superb as a smart lawyer dying of AIDS who sues his former employers with the help of Denzel Washington, who matches Hanks' work note for note. And that is correct. Up next is Jonathan Rosenbaum. He wrote for the Chicago Reader, writing, Philadelphia is a heartbreakingly mediocre movie. It's dishonest, and it's often legally, medically, and politically incorrect. And it breaks my heart that I must say it's simply not good enough, and I'd rather people not see it at all. This is a terrible thing to say, and it is also false.
Yes.
Yes, it's like he went on to say, he said that it was dishonest. That's patently incorrect. Yeah. Like, you could say probably that it didn't get all of the legal and medical stuff right. And I don't think there's anything that they did with medically incorrect, or that it was politically incorrect. And I don't even understand politically inaccurate. I don't even understand that part about it. But I think his heart and mind didn't get changed by this movie. That's what I think.
Sure. And, I can say that something that's left out of Philadelphia is the fact, like I was speaking on earlier, organizations like ACT UP and like the community response that made the changes. I mean, people were showing up at each other's doors. They were getting drugs underground. They were like, what do we need to do to save people who are dropping dead? We're just going to do it ourselves. And the community did it. And I think that part is kind of left out, the political, how people had to become politicized in order to survive and to help their brothers and sisters and trans sisters and trans brothers survive. They did that, and it became hyper politicized because it was not being, like I said, attended to by the government at all. I mean, people weren't having access to drugs at all. No one took it seriously. There was no funding for it for so long. And I think that whole story is just missing. It's missing. This is a lawyer who has a lot of resources, and it's 1993, so things are different a little bit with drugs. And so not for everybody, but for him, he had access, and that part is kind of just missing and left out. But I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because the story that needed to be told was the story that was told very beautifully and very effectively. So, Jonathan, I respect your opinion, and I disagree with you.
That's a very PC way of putting that.
I think politically correct. So then Dan DeNicola from the Daily Gazette from Schenectady says that Philadelphia is graced with splendid performances. This often stirring drama not only has its heart in the right place, it delivers a strong, convincing portrait as well as a lesson about decency in a story aptly set in the city of brotherly love. Dan, strong yes. I'm
Yeah,
strong
yeah,
agreement with
absolutely.
that. I think that's right. It has its heart in the right place. I really feel that.
Right, right. And this the difference between a professional critic and what I do or what a lot of people do is that the reason that they're hired to review movies is not so much to give their opinion because anybody can do that. It's to write beautiful prose about their opinion
Mm.
to effectively communicate what they felt about a movie. And I think that what he has written here is well done. It's like you could tell this dude is a writer.
Absolutely. Um,
And what about Luke?
okay, and then Luke Y. Thompson from New Times says, "Can't a movie make us feel sympathy for a gay character without having him die and spout opera cliches?" Okay, now, Luke.
We talked about this earlier
Wait, we
now.
talked about this earlier. Okay. Yes, we talked about it earlier. And I just want to say that, like, again, some of the stereotypes, I understand. I understand the critiques, but he he was sick and he did die, and a lot of people did die, and a lot of people love opera regardless of your sexual orientation, and a lot of gay men love opera, and that's okay. Who cares? Eat the fried chicken. Listen to the
Yeah.
right? Like, you know,
Yeah.
my Broadway musicals, like, let's accept the parts of the quote unquote stereotypes or how it gets coded in society and love. And in this case, it absolutely did. And he was really sick and was going to pass. That's how the character was going to go. It's 1993. He was in later stages of AIDS disease. He wasn't going to get better. He just wasn't. And now people are living with HIV longer and healthier lives than maybe even me, who is an HIV negative person. It's a totally different world now. So, but it wasn't then, and it wasn't in the 80s, and it wasn't still in 1993. And so, Luke, I hear you, and also I disagree in the way that it does really reflect that moment in time.
Right, right, right. And the movie was not just about a gay character. It was about AIDS. It goes hand in hand. Like you could and actually later on they do have movies about gay character just living their lives and or like gay characters, transgender characters, movies about queer characters. They're doing the movies that are just about them living their life, not about them dying from a deadly disease. But this had to be a movie about AIDS and being gay. This movie was doing the work of two things. It had two messages. So in this particular case, no, you couldn't do it. You couldn't do it, Luke. That's not what this movie is about. So finally, Philadelphia is, as of this recording, available on streaming. That's it for today. Next week, we're going to take a trip to the past and check out some future action. And that action takes place in a movie called Time Cop. Have you seen Time Cop?
No, I don't know anything about Time Cop. What is Time Cop? Well, I guess I should listen and find out.
Yes, but I can tell you that Time Cop is a movie that stars Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he's a cop in the future. He gets sent back in time to prevent somebody from messing up his future.
Oh, cool.
So that's the gist of Time Cop.
like
And
it.
Time Cop is fascinating because it spawned a TV series that did not have Jean-Claude Van Damme, so, or I believe his character. It kind of changed everything about what the original premise of the movie was. But I haven't seen that movie in a long time, and I'm eager to revisit it. You can follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. And don't forget that you can contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at fanmail@backlinkcinema.com. Emily, do you have any additional plugs?
Well, this is just such a blast. And, if you want to stay in contact, find me Instagram at Ems Marinelli. If you want to, or on Facebook at Ems Marinelli. And then my website is emsmarinelli.com.
Okay. Have you sent me those links already?
I can't remember. I'll double check, and if not, I think I did, and I think I sent you some pictures too, but I'll double check.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
With the links with the pictures, then I got them. Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that those links are in the show
Thank
notes.
you.
One last time. Yeah, no problem. I want people to get the book. I want them to follow you on Instagram. I saw that you followed me, so I followed you right back. I want to make sure that people stay in contact with you. So one last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlit Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. And I know you've enjoyed our guest, Emily, so please check out our book, Comfort Sequels, The Psychology of Movie Sequels from the 80s and 90s. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.